When Pink Floyd's concert was canceled without explanation, David Gilmour told his bandmates, "We came here to play. We must perform for the thousands who came for us." What happened next in the stadium parking lot is still talked about decades later as the greatest unauthorized concert in rock history. It was August 15th, 1987, and Pink Floyd was scheduled to perform at Chicago's legendary Soldier Field as part of their massive and critically acclaimed A Momentary Lapse of Reason world tour. Over 65,000 devoted fans had purchased tickets months in advance for what was expected to be one of the most spectacular and memorable concerts of the entire year. The band had been performing to consistently sold-out stadiums across America for weeks, and their elaborate, cutting-edge stage production had been receiving universally rave reviews from music critics and fans alike throughout the tour. But something went catastrophically wrong that absolutely nobody saw coming, and it had nothing to do with the band's preparation or performance capabilities. At exactly 6:30 p.m., just 2 hours before Pink Floyd was scheduled to take the stage and begin what should have been one of the most anticipated concerts in Chicago's music history, an announcement came over the stadium's public address system that would shock and devastate everyone in attendance. The concert was canceled. No detailed explanation was given. No specific reason was provided. No rescheduled date was announced. Just a simple, devastating statement that would crush the hopes of tens of thousands of people. Tonight's Pink Floyd concert has been canceled due to circumstances beyond our control. Please exit the stadium in an orderly fashion and contact your point of purchase for refund information. The reaction from the crowd was immediate, intense, and emotionally overwhelming. Thousands of fans who had traveled from across the Midwest and beyond to see Pink Floyd stood in stunned, disbelieving silence, unable to process what they had just heard over the stadium speakers. Many had driven hundreds of miles from states like Wisconsin, Indiana, Michigan, and Iowa, taken precious time off work, and spent money they couldn't easily afford on tickets, hotels, travel expenses, and meals. Some had been looking forward to this specific concert for months, planning their schedules around it and building up expectations that had now been completely shattered. The initial confusion and disbelief quickly transformed into anger, frustration, and vocal demands for answers. Fans began approaching stadium security guards, venue staff members, and anyone wearing official credentials who might be able to explain what was happening and why their long-anticipated evening had been so abruptly destroyed. But nobody seemed to have any concrete information about why the concert had been canceled, and nobody in authority was willing or able to provide any details beyond the basic, unsatisfying announcement that had already been made. Backstage in the artist areas of Soldier Field, Pink Floyd was equally shocked, confused, and frustrated by the sudden and unexpected cancellation. David Gilmour, Roger Waters, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright had been going through their normal pre-show preparation routines, tuning instruments, running through technical checks, and mentally preparing for what they expected to be another triumphant performance, when they were suddenly informed by their management team and tour organizers that the concert could not and would not proceed as planned. The band members themselves were initially not given a clear, detailed explanation for the cancellation. Only vague references to circumstances beyond our control and unforeseen complications that made it legally and practically impossible to perform that evening. This lack of information was almost as frustrating for the band as it was for their fans, since they had traveled to Chicago specifically to perform and had no desire to disappoint the thousands of people who had come to see them play. What the band and their management team eventually learned through urgent phone calls and emergency meetings was that there had been a complex, multi-party dispute between the concert promoters, the stadium management company, the city of Chicago, and various municipal departments over permits, insurance requirements, security arrangements, and crowd control protocols. The specific details were bureaucratic, technical, and seemingly petty, but the combined result was that at the very last minute, the city had refused to allow the concert to proceed until certain unspecified conditions were met that could not be satisfied on such short notice. For most major touring acts in the music industry, this kind of last-minute cancellation would have been the definitive end of the story. The standard procedure in such bureaucratic situations is to work with management teams, promoters, lawyers, and venue operators to reschedule the show for a later date, issue refunds to disappointed fans through official channels, and move on to the next city on the tour schedule. The financial and logistical complications of dealing with canceled concerts are typically handled entirely by business managers, accountants, and legal teams, while the artists themselves distance themselves from the controversy and avoid any personal involvement in resolving the situation. But David Gilmour was absolutely not willing to accept this conventional outcome or abandon the thousands of people who had come specifically to see Pink Floyd perform. As Gilmour stood backstage in the Soldier Field artist area, watching through windows and monitors as thousands of disappointed, confused, and increasingly angry fans slowly began filing out of the stadium in obvious emotional distress, he was struck by the fundamental unfairness and human cruelty of the entire situation. These people had done absolutely nothing wrong. They had purchased tickets in good faith through official channels, made extensive arrangements to attend the concert, traveled significant distances, and showed up ready and excited to experience Pink Floyd's music in a live setting. The fact that they were being sent home empty-handed and emotionally devastated because of bureaucratic disputes and political complications that had absolutely nothing to do with the band or the fans seemed fundamentally wrong and morally unacceptable to him. "This isn't right," Gilmour told his bandmates with obvious emotion and determination as they watched the stadium slowly emptying of disappointed fans. "These people came here specifically to see us play. We came here specifically to play for them. We shouldn't let some meaningless bureaucratic nonsense prevent that from happening when we have the ability to make it right." Roger Waters immediately pointed out the obvious legal and practical complications that could result from defying the official cancellation. "David, we can't just ignore the city authorities and venue management. If the officials say we can't perform, we legally cannot perform. We could face serious legal consequences, substantial financial fines, potential arrest, and damage to our professional reputation if we defy the cancellation order and attempt to perform anyway." But Gilmour had already begun forming a plan that was both elegantly simple and potentially revolutionary in its implications for how artists could respond to similar situations. "What if we don't perform inside the stadium where all the bureaucratic restrictions apply?" he asked his bandmates. "What if we set up outside, in the parking lot, where the city's jurisdiction and the venue's authority might be different or less clearly defined? What if we play a free, impromptu concert for anyone who wants to stay and listen, without charging admission or dealing with any of the official complications?" The idea was simultaneously brilliant and potentially disastrous for everyone involved. On one hand, it would allow Pink Floyd to honor their artistic and moral commitment to their fans and actually perform the music that people had traveled so far to hear. On the other hand, it could result in serious legal troubles, safety concerns, crowd control problems, and logistical nightmares that could damage the band's reputation, endanger their fans, and create long-term professional and financial consequences that would be difficult to predict or control. Nick Mason and Richard Wright were understandably hesitant about Gilmour's radical plan, fully understanding both its emotional appeal and its serious potential risks. They recognized the genuine desire to honor their commitment to fans, but they were also concerned about the practical and legal implications of defying official authorities. Roger Waters was characteristically skeptical and analytical, pointing out that an impromptu, unauthorized outdoor concert could easily spiral completely out of control and create genuinely dangerous situations for both the band members and the thousands of fans who might participate. But David Gilmour was absolutely determined to find a way to perform for the people who had come to see Pink Floyd, regardless of the obstacles and complications. "Look," he said with passionate conviction, "we have our equipment, we have our instruments, and we have thousands of people who deserve to hear Pink Floyd play the music they came to experience." Sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks that other people wouldn't take. Sometimes being a true artist means putting your art and your audience ahead of bureaucracy, safety concerns, and conventional business practices. What happened next would become one of the most legendary, talked about, and influential moments in the entire history of rock music, creating a story that would be told and retold for decades. Word began to spread among the departing fans that Pink Floyd was seriously considering an alternative performance somewhere outside the official venue. The details were initially vague, unconfirmed, and passed along through whispered conversations. But rumors began circulating throughout the parking lot and surrounding areas that the band might actually play somewhere outside the stadium. Social media, internet communications, and instant messaging didn't exist in 1987, so information spread entirely through direct word of mouth, creating a sense of growing excitement and anticipation among fans who had been emotionally devastated just hours earlier. Meanwhile, Pink Floyd's experienced and dedicated road crew began the incredibly complex task of moving essential equipment from inside Soldier Field to the stadium's main parking lot. This wasn't a simple matter of unplugging a few amplifiers and carrying them outside. The band's elaborate stage setup included massive sound systems, sophisticated lighting rigs, and special effects equipment that had been specifically designed for indoor stadium use and had never been intended for spontaneous outdoor deployment. But the crew, inspired by Gilmour's determination to perform for the fans and energized by the unprecedented nature of what they were attempting, worked with remarkable speed, creativity, and technical expertise to create a functional makeshift outdoor stage in the parking lot. They understood that they couldn't possibly replicate the full spectacle and technical sophistication of Pink Floyd's normal concert production, but they were confident that they could provide enough professional quality equipment to deliver the music with reasonable sound quality and sufficient visual impact to create a meaningful concert experience. As word spread more widely that Pink Floyd was actually setting up real equipment in the parking lot and seriously planning to perform, thousands of fans who had been in the process of leaving the area began to return with growing excitement and disbelief. Cars that had been heading toward the highway exits made dramatic U-turns and came back to Soldier Field. People who had already driven several miles away from the stadium turned around and raced back when they heard the incredible news through car radios and conversations with other fans. By 9 p.m., nearly 40,000 people had gathered in the Soldier Field parking lot, creating one of the largest spontaneous concerts in the entire history of rock music. The crowd was completely unlike any typical concert audience that anyone had ever seen. These weren't people who had casually decided to attend a show or purchase tickets at the last minute. These were deeply dedicated Pink Floyd fans who had already been emotionally and financially invested in seeing the band perform, and were now part of something completely unprecedented, historic, and potentially illegal. The atmosphere in the parking lot was electric with excitement, gratitude, anticipation, and a genuine sense of being part of music history as it was being made. Fans understood intuitively that what was happening was absolutely extraordinary and potentially illegal, which added an element of rebellion, authenticity, and shared conspiracy to the experience that no officially sanctioned, bureaucratically approved concert could possibly provide. When Pink Floyd finally took their hastily constructed makeshift stage at 9:45 p.m., the emotional response from the crowd was absolutely overwhelming and unlike anything the band members had ever experienced in their decades of professional performance. The cheers, applause, and raw emotional reaction from 40,000 people who had genuinely believed their evening was completely ruined created an energy and connection that the band members later said was more intense and meaningful than any officially sanctioned concert they had ever performed. David Gilmour stepped up to the microphone and addressed the crowd with words that would be remembered, quoted, and referenced for decades by fans and music historians. "They told us we couldn't play for you tonight. They were wrong. We came here to play music, and you came here to listen to music. That's exactly what we're going to do, and nobody is going to stop us." What followed was a nearly 3-hour concert that fans and music historians still consider one of Pink Floyd's greatest, most emotionally powerful, and most historically significant performances. Without the elaborate production values, sophisticated special effects, and technical perfection of their normal stadium shows, the band was forced to rely purely on their musical abilities, their connection with the audience, and the raw power of their songs to create an unforgettable experience. The set list included many of Pink Floyd's most beloved and emotionally resonant songs, performed with an intimacy, spontaneity, and emotional intensity that was completely different from their typical arena presentations. Classic tracks like "Comfortably Numb," "Wish You Were Here," "Another Brick in the Wall," and "Money" took on entirely new meanings when performed in the spontaneous, rebellious, and historically unprecedented context of an unauthorized parking lot concert. The sound quality, while not technically perfect, was surprisingly professional and effective considering the circumstances and time constraints. Pink Floyd's experienced sound engineers had managed to create a system that could reach most of the parking lot with reasonable clarity, and the outdoor acoustics actually enhanced certain aspects of the band's music, particularly the atmospheric and spatial elements that had always been central to their artistic identity. Perhaps most importantly, the relationship between the band and the audience was completely transformed by the shared experience of defying authority and participating in something that had never happened before in rock history. This wasn't just a concert. It was a statement about the power of music to bring people together and transcend bureaucratic obstacles, official restrictions, and conventional limitations. The parking lot concert lasted until nearly 1 a.m., when Chicago police finally arrived in significant numbers to shut down the unauthorized event. But by that time, Pink Floyd had completed their full intended set. The 40,000 fans who had witnessed the performance had experienced something that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. And music history had been permanently changed. No arrests were made, and no criminal charges were filed against Pink Floyd or their crew members. The legal ambiguity of performing in a parking lot that was technically private property, combined with the overwhelmingly positive media coverage of the band's gesture toward their fans, apparently convinced city authorities that pursuing legal action would be counterproductive and potentially embarrassing for the city government. The story of Pink Floyd's parking lot concert spread rapidly through the music industry and fan communities worldwide. In an era before social media, internet forums, and viral videos, the story was passed along through word of mouth, music magazines, radio programs, and television reports, eventually becoming one of the most famous examples of artists going above and beyond for their fans. Bootleg recordings of the parking lot concert became some of the most sought-after items in Pink Floyd collecting circles. The audio quality wasn't technically perfect, but the historical significance and emotional intensity of the performance made these recordings incredibly valuable to fans and collectors around the world. Today, music historians and Pink Floyd fans still discuss the parking lot concert as one of the band's most important performances, even though it was never officially recorded or commercially released. The story has become part of rock folklore, representing the idea that authentic music and genuine connection between artists and fans is more important than official approval or perfect circumstances. The concert also demonstrated Pink Floyd's evolution from an experimental art rock band into artists who understood their responsibility to their audience. Gilmour's willingness to take legal and financial risks to avoid disappointing fans showed a level of commitment that went far beyond typical professional obligations or standard business practices. The parking lot concert established a new standard for how artists should respond when circumstances prevent them from fulfilling obligations to their fans. Gilmour's decision to find a way to perform despite official obstacles became a model for other musicians facing similar situations. The story has been referenced countless times by many other artists who have faced very similar situations involving canceled concerts, difficult venue disputes, and various bureaucratic obstacles. Musicians from various genres have cited Gilmour's example as inspiration for their own decisions to prioritize fans over convenience, safety, or official approval when circumstances have threatened to prevent performances. Music industry professionals and concert promoters have also studied the parking lot concert as an example of how artists can maintain goodwill and positive relationships with their fan base, even when external factors create seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The long-term benefits to Pink Floyd's reputation and fan loyalty far outweighed any short-term risks or complications that resulted from the unauthorized performance. The concert has also become a symbol of authentic artistic integrity in an industry that is often dominated by commercial considerations and risk-averse decision-making. Gilmour's choice to prioritize music and human connection over bureaucratic compliance resonated with fans who were tired of seeing artists treat concerts as purely business transactions rather than artistic and emotional experiences. Academic studies of fan culture and artist-audience relationships frequently reference the parking lot concert as an example of how shared experiences of rebellion and authenticity can create lasting bonds between performers and their audiences. The fans who attended that night didn't just witness a concert, they participated in a moment of cultural resistance that became part of their personal and collective identity. The bootleg recordings that circulated after the concert became legendary not just for their historical significance, but for their capture of genuine spontaneity and emotion that studio recordings and officially produced live albums often lack. The imperfect sound quality actually added to the authenticity and underground credibility of the recordings. Today, the parking lot concert is frequently cited as one of the greatest unauthorized performances in rock history, alongside famous guerrilla concerts by artists like the Beatles on the Apple Corps rooftop and Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison. It represents a moment when artistic integrity and fan loyalty triumphed over bureaucracy and conventional limitations. The story continues to inspire musicians, fans, and cultural commentators who believe that authentic art sometimes requires breaking rules and challenging authority in service of genuine human connection and artistic expression. If this incredible story of artistic integrity, fan dedication, and the night when Pink Floyd defied authority to create music history inspired you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with anyone who believes that real art sometimes requires breaking the rules and putting your audience first. Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone chose to do the right thing despite potential consequences? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing stories about the times when musicians proved that music is more important than bureaucracy.